Now, I had this question asked of me the other day: how do you come up with fiction ideas? Now, the person I was talking to, I think they had 2 ideas that they turned into Kindle books, but the well had run dry and they couldn't think of anything else to write about, so that's why they asked me that question. So this was something that I used to have trouble with too in the early days. I used to struggle with coming up with ideas. What could I write about? Now, one thing you can do for coming up with an idea is start small. Rather than thinking of this big huge idea that you need to come up with, start small. Now, what I mean by starting small, I mean start with a scene. Now, there might have been some movie that you've watched recently or a TV show that you've watched recently, and there probably is a good chance that, you know, you're probably attracted to TV shows or things that are, you know, related to maybe your niche. Maybe if you are writing fiction, romance, you might be a person who watches a lot of romance movies or TV shows and romantic stuff like that. Or maybe you are someone who's into action, so you might be kind of watching the Michael Bay stuff, all the explosions and all that. But you will find that there might be a TV show or a movie where there's a particular scene that stands out in your mind and it was really, really clever. So why don't you take that small scene out and put it on a piece of paper and forget the rest of the movie, what went on before and what went after, and instead write your movie version of it. What do you think happened on the run up to that scene? And what do you think happened after that scene? So what you can do is you can go either way. You can have a look at all the events that led up to that person being in that coffee shop or meeting that person or, you know, getting fired from that job. And then you can have a look at what happened after that. So you can start small and work that way. So you will find sometimes that even doing an action like that, working with something that's already there, kind of takes the pressure off you. There's nothing worse than looking at a blank canvas and thinking, well, you know, I have to come up with something today. So why not borrow something that somebody else has made and use that as a starting block that you can work off? Now, you might find when you're working with that you can't make it work, but because you are in that creative mode, you might find another idea might come to mind for maybe a book idea. So that's one thing you can try, just so you're not working with a blank slate. Have a look at a scene or from a TV show or movie and work with that and see if you can create something from that. Now, another thing you can do too is have a look at the news. Now, of course you can look at world events, but why not look at local news? So there may be a story that's come up in your area. Again, sometimes you will find stories that come up in the news are really hard to believe, and you know, if you read it in a book, you would probably toss the book away and say, you know, that's unbelievable, that couldn't happen. But you will find some crazy stories come up in the news. Now, one thing I showed in a podcast episode and in an article, it was months ago, but I'll go through it again one more time, and it was the Florida Man idea generator. Now, if you type Florida Man into Google, you are going to find the weird, the wacky, the bizarre stories of Florida. Now, I don't know if there's other places in the world that are bizarre as crazy as Florida. Maybe there is, you can let me know. But you will find some crazy stories come up with that. Now, I've been reading somewhere, I don't know what it was, and somebody said, if you're looking for an idea, put in Florida Man and then put in your date of birth. So I had put in Florida Man, I had put in the 23rd of April, and I had got this story up in my search results. Now, this story was about a man who unfortunately was at his wit's end. I think he owed a huge amount of debt. He hadn't got 2 pennies to rub together, but he wanted to leave money behind for his family. So what he did was he came up with a plan that he was well insured, his life insurance was paid up to date, but one of the things in the life insurance was that if he was ever shot or murdered, that his family or the policy would pay it and his family would be taken care of. So he came up with an idea of how he would kill himself and make it not look like a suicide. So what he did was he had looked up in Google and he had looked for weather balloons. Now, he'd bought a weather balloon, and then he had, I don't know whether he had a handgun or he needed to purchase one, but he got a handgun as well too. And what he did was he went out one night outside the compound or outside the apartments where he lived and went round to maybe a quiet corner or something like that, and then he shot himself. Now, of course, the gunshot attracted the neighbours. Everybody came racing out, and they found the poor man dead on the ground. And there was no sign of anybody around. There was no sign of any gun. There was no sign of anything. So it seemed like something that you would see in one of the Agatha Christie novels or something like that. It was just a crazy murder scene. And how was this man killed? And nobody seen an intruder or a robber or anything racing away. So the police eventually worked it out that going on his search history, they had found that he'd been researching weather balloons. And what he did was, on the night that he killed himself, he tied his gun to the weather balloon. So when he shot himself and he fell to the ground, the weather balloon just took off and carried the evidence away. Now, I don't know if the gun ever was found, but going on his Google search results, the police then were able to work out how he killed himself and how he got, the evidence away. So it did look then that he had been shot. Now, I don't know what happened, whether the policy did pay out or how long it took them to solve the shooting, but that's the conclusion that they had come to. Now, to me, that was a crazy story. So how could I put that into a story for my book? Well, as I said in that episode, that article on the podcast episode, there's a couple of different directions you could go with. So say, for example, maybe you are a thriller writer. Could you have maybe a scientist or something like that who has been shot, and a policeman has come on the scene, and they're wondering, how was the scientist killed? It looked like a murder. Somebody was framed for it who looked like they were innocent, but that kind of all the evidence, tied to that person. It looked like they were guilty. So could you do it like a murder kind of thriller? Add that into it. Could you have like a character who could be like Poirot or someone like that, who could be your great detective, and the rest of the police station is totally stumped. They believe he was shot, they've given up on it, but your detective is the one that's kept going, and he's finally worked out exactly how it's happened. Now, that could be one genre. Another one then could be, if you were maybe in romance or something like that, what you could do is take the gun out, maybe still use the weather balloon, but what if there was a glass bottle tied to it with a message into it? So if you imagine a bottle thrown in the sea, it comes up on the beach somewhere. Well, in this case here, we have a weather balloon that's floating all over the world with this bottle in it. So it could be a love note, it could be a suicide note, it could be all these different things. You can let your imagination run wild with you. So if I was maybe in the romance genre, I could go for something like maybe, when the film with Tom Hanks, at the moment it slipped my mind, but you know the one I'm on about, the romance one, Sleepless in Seattle. That's the one, Sleepless in Seattle. You could have a version of that, maybe where a child has bought maybe a weather balloon for a school project or something like that, and the father is a widower or the mother is a widower, and out of desperation they just get frustrated and put a message into a bottle, throw it up in the weather balloon, say a couple of prayers, and hopefully that other person will be attracted to their mother, and blah blah blah. But the gist of it. But you could use that weather balloon as the kind of maybe the start of your book or part of your book, and that's what's going to draw your two characters together. So that could be two ideas that you could use just from simple kind of weird wonderful news that you will find. Again, you could use maybe the idea generator, or you could play around with it, come up with maybe a scene from a movie or TV show, or if you know of a movie maybe that you were disappointed in, could you write a better version of that? So again, you're not starting with a blank canvas. So those are a couple of ideas for coming up with ideas for your books, and again, you'll find a huge amount of results in Google. So have a look through all the weird and wonderful news, not just global but local, and have a look and see if there's some way you can put a spin on it. Another thing too, if you were maybe writing historical books, go back through the past history, have a look at maybe some of the news stories from some of the papers. Sometimes you can go to some websites that have archives of old papers from maybe the early 1900s or 1800s or whatever, and you can find some weird and wonderful stories in there. Now, one of the ones I had found when I was writing romance books was about a huge train crash and how many people were killed in it. And what I did was I had taken that news story back from then, and I had put my female character on the train, and it crashed, and of course she was injured and she was burned, partly burned, and she had to be taken off at the nearest town, and she met this man who took care of her, who was a local doctor, and they fell in love. So that was one way I came up with another idea. So don't just think, global news, think local news, and don't just think news that's happening right now. Go back in time, have a look through, past history, and see what news stories are coming up in newspapers then. Or have a look at the weird and wonderful stories that are popping up. Again, like the man with the weather balloon. Is there some way you could put a spin on that and create a story for your next book that way? So I hope that's helped you out. Now, if you'd like to know more about me, you're very welcome to come over to writecom.com. That's writecome.com. And over there I'll show you how to make money from your content. Not just your writing, but your videos and all those different things, all the good stuff. And you'll find a lot of content and courses on self-publishing if that's what you're into. Now, if you'd like to ask me a question, you'd like me to tackle something in a future video, you're very welcome to send me an email. And my email address is barryjmcdonald@gmail.com, and you'll find me over there. And if you've got a question, you're likely to ask me a question on anything you'd like me to cover in a video, don't hesitate to send an email over. So as always, thanks for sharing your time with me again today, and take care and have a great day. Bye bye.